in this lesson, we'll connect the bones of the character's upper body to our control objects. So all of our controls are now in place. I'd like to also point out quickly that from time to time, it's a good idea to check your layers. So in between lessons, I just made sure that the center of gravity and the back controls were added to the controls layer. So again, it's just something we can check as we progress. And another thing to keep in mind is that, again, if you decide on using any of these new controls that we have added, if you decide to, let's say, use them for another rig, well, you could always go ahead and add them to your repository. So for our back control, here's what we could do with it selected. We can clone it with Control V. We'll make it a copy, and then we'll go ahead and cut it so it's no longer a part of any hierarchy. So at this point, with it still selected, we can now head over to Export, Export Selected, and we could always call this square underscore shape, and we'll choose Save. So now when we choose OK, take a look, only that object is going to be exported out. I'll go ahead and now choose OK, and with it still selected, we can go ahead and delete it. Let's do the same thing for our center of gravity control. I really like to use this type of shape for the character's center. It's just very clear. So with it selected, again, we'll go ahead and duplicate it, Control V as a copy, and then we'll go ahead and cut it, and now we'll export it out. Export, Export Selected, and we'll always just go ahead and use this for our center of gravity. So I'm going to go ahead and call this COG Shape and choose Save. Alright, there we have it. Alright, let's go ahead and delete this object, and we'll get right to tying our bones down. So what we can do is go ahead and work with constraints. We just need to control the rotation of most of these bone objects. When it comes to the center of gravity, we're going to want to control the position and rotation of that center. So to control the rotation of an object, we can work with the orientation constraint. Here's how this works. We'd grab the bone to constrain, then we'd head over to animation and choose constraints, and we'd grab the constraint we need. Here it is, the orientation constraint. Now it's time to click on the object we'd like to constrain it to, and take a look at what happens. It shifts because the orientation of the bone object and the control differ. So if this happens, all you need to do is go ahead and work with Keep Initial Offset. So with the bone still selected, we can go to our motion panel and go to the rotation list. That's where we find our orientation constraint. So take a look, here's the weight. It's tied down to our chest control. But now we can go ahead and choose Keep Initial Offset, and it's going to remember where the bone was made initially, so that when we go ahead and work with the constraint, it'll keep that offset for us. So that's really nice. When we start to rotate our control now, you can see we're now driving the chest. Alright, very nice. So we can do the same thing for the character's back. Again, with the backbone selected, we'll head over to Animation, Constraints, and we'll choose the orientation constraint. We'll select our back control. If it shifts, no worries. With the bone still selected, we'll just go ahead and turn on Keep Initial Offset. Very good. So we can start to test this out. When we grab the back as we start to move, we're also driving the character's chest. Let's go ahead and press F3 to take a look at this in textured mode. Very cool. Alrighty, so everything's moving nicely. So you get the idea as to how we'll tie down the character's pelvis. We'll grab the pelvis bone and apply that orientation constraint. Let's go ahead and select our pelvis control. Whoa, there's that shift. No worries. We'll go ahead and correct that with Keep Initial Offset. By the next level, I'm going to show you how to work with constraints without having to use Keep Initial Offset, so we don't have any messy offset values to deal with. Alright, so that's very nice. So all of our controls except for the center of gravity are taken care of. If we were to grab the center of gravity and start to rotate that, yes, we're moving the character, but if we start to move that control, nothing happens. So how can we tie down both position and rotation? Well, we can work with a position constraint and an orientation constraint. Let's go ahead and do that. So with our root bone selected, we'll head over to Animation, Constraints, and we'll grab our orientation constraint, and we'll tie that to our center of gravity. Alright, so from here, let's go ahead and turn on keep initial offset. Now the next one we'll work with, the next constraint, is going to be the position constraint. And since we've already made sure that the position of our center of gravity is aligned to our root, now when we grab that bone and choose the position constraint and we select our center of gravity, there's going to be no need for keep initial offset. So if I were to go to the position list, that's where we find the position constraint. You can see we have similar settings, and there's keep initial offset. Again, not needed here. So now when we go ahead and grab that control and we start to move it, we're driving the entire upper body now. As we go ahead and rotate, we're driving the body's orientation. There we have it. Very nice. All right, so we've managed to create controls for the character's torso. Now in the following lesson, let's say we go ahead and move to the character's neck and head.